Okay, everybody, I just got an espresso machine. Espresso, that's hard for me to say. But I got one for my reading room and I absolutely love it. Now, do not judge me. I have no idea what I'm doing. So if you have any tips or tricks on how I can do better in terms of making my morning coffee, please leave me a comment down below. I'm brand new to this. If you know my story, I left the Mormon church about 9 months ago, which means that this brown liquid, this magical, mysterious drink, is new to my life, and I'm learning how to enjoy it. So, with that being said, we're going to be getting into how to read difficult books today while enjoying a cup of coffee. Thank you very much. I'm going to share with you what I have experienced or learned myself reading difficult books, what a difficult book even is, and I'll give you a few tips and tricks to make them more accessible. Oh, and as always, I will give you a book recommendation to dig into this week. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Read Well podcast. My name is Eddie Hood, and I talk about great books, the kind of books that make you think and make you want to hit pause and slow down. And the biggest message of our community is simply this: to give yourself permission to read well, to take your time, and to really enjoy a book. And we're talking about difficult books today. So, what does the word difficult mean? Well, I've read books that are difficult emotionally. They are getting into really sort of sensitive topics, things that I've struggled with, and I'm having a hard time turning the pages because it brings up pain or emotion that I don't, that I've somehow suppressed and didn't know. Anyway, that's not the kind of book we're talking about today. That's a whole different kind of reading experience. Also, we're not talking about the size of the book, right? Sometimes people erroneously assume that a 700-page book is by default going to be difficult. That's not the case. I've read 30-page essays that I thought were, wow, quite difficult, but worth my time to read. And I've read massive tomes that just flew by because they were strictly entertainment, great fun to read, but they weren't difficult, right? They were just long. That's a different thing. In my book club last night, we got talking about an essay by Henry David Thoreau titled "Walking," and in that work, he discusses how he would often go for walks for at least 4 hours a day, because he needed time, one, to be in nature, but two, to ruminate, to take what he was reading and studying and really chew on it and think about it and just be with the material. So that's the kind of book we're talking about today, the kind of text that you know in your heart, this is going to be a little bit of a commitment, and I'm going to need to spend some time with this. So let's get into that. Okay, I have a couple examples here of what I would consider difficult books, and they're difficult for kind of different reasons. The first is The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. This book is hard because it's complex. It's deep psychological analysis of different neuroses that people have, why we fear death, and so on. I mean, it is a hard read, and it will take you a significant amount of time to enjoy it and get the most out of it. We read this for book club, and while there are a few parts I don't agree with, much of it was fascinating, and I'm glad I spent the time on it. Another book from book club that we read is The Intellectual Life by A.G. Sertalange. Now, this is not a difficult book to read. I mean, you could read it quickly and get the gist of it. But I put it in the difficult category because, as you can see on the side, all of these notes here, it took time for me to get out of sort of that surface level reading into the real meat of what Sertalange was teaching us to really get the benefit from the book. Knowing that this book was going to, mean quite a bit to me, I wanted to spend time on it. So it became a difficult book because it required energy. So those are examples of what we're talking about today. Now, I feel the same way about some of Jane Austen's works and Dostoevsky. We all know I love Dostoevsky. Poetry. It's just so many things where when you read the first passage, your brain kind of zones in and says, hey, Eddie, this is going to be a little more than a magazine read. You're going to have to pay attention if you want to get something out of this. Okay, we have defined what difficult means. Well, before we get into how to sort of extract the goodness, the sort of wonderful juice in these books, that was really weird. But before we get into that, let's talk about why you would want to read difficult books. I can tell you this: by reading difficult books, I have gotten better at reading difficult books. Now, that might sound a little weird, But this is a skill that you'll learn, and it's fascinating and extremely rewarding to see your brain learn to settle down into hard things and over time begin to understand them. When I first read something as fictional as Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, I mean, it is a story that you can follow. I couldn't follow it, right? My brain was all over the place and I was getting lost in the details. I had to read passages several times. Now, when I read something like that, my brain is able to sort of settle into that information and really pay attention. So, if you feel like you're somebody who sort of struggles with ADHD, we have some of that in my family and have experience with that personally. Reading is just a fantastic way to train your brain to hone in on what matters. I think that's why we want to read difficult books. One, it's like going to the gym for our brains. But two, you get to sort of educate yourself on really meaty content, something that matters. Have you ever felt this way, you guys and gals, um, where you come home and you're flipping through your phone, and even if you're reading something sort of semi-intellectual on your phone or just valuable, maybe I love articles from the New Yorker and the Atlantic and all of these places. Even when I'm reading those, I start to feel hollow. I absolutely feel hollow after 20 minutes on social media. And look, I'm not judging. I love social media. I'm on it every day chatting with you guys, but it sort of leaves a hole in my spirit. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I don't feel that when I dig into a book. And it doesn't have to be a difficult book. I feel so much better when I read Tolkien or King or Dennis Lehane or anybody. But if I read something that's going to challenge me mentally, not only do I feel better, but I also am sort of really honing in on a complex subject. I don't know, just that sort of meatiness adds something to my life. So that's why I like to read difficult books. Now, let's get into some of the tips and tricks I've learned along the way to get what did we call it? The juice out of these books? Anyway, let's try and do that next. Okay. Step number one to reading a difficult book is a lot like going on a date with somebody you've never met before. Now, when you meet somebody, you're going to make a quick judgment call, right? You're going to think to yourself, uh, this is going to be a first date only, and that's it. Or you're going to think, wow, there is really something to this person that I want to get to know. I want to learn about this person and be with them and just sort of experience life with them. When you find that person, luckily I found her when I was 14 and I'm still married to her many, many years later. I love you, sweetheart. When you find that person, you want to give yourself to them. It's this experience of love is like, I don't know, it's the greatest thing in the world to give yourself to somebody you love. It's the same with a great book. Now, let's say you pick up The Denial of Death and you read the first page and you're like face blown off. Like, whoa, okay, this is really good stuff, but it's dense and complex. And I feel like I need a PhD to understand it. Well, secret, you don't need a PhD. You just need to learn to read differently. So the first step is to decide to treat this book the same way you would decide to get to know that really special person across the table from you, that person that has something special inside them. So you have to make that decision, first of all. And what that means is that you're going to spend the appropriate amount of time, focus, and energy in this book. Okay, you're not going to get a lot out of The Denial of Death, The Intellectual Life, if you just add it to your reading list and burn through it in the course of a week. Sure, you'll have read it, but you won't have gotten to know it. Step one, getting to know the book you're going to love for the rest of your life. Okay, step two is to get to know the lay of the land. Let's go back to our analogy of falling in love with someone or a book. You've decided, wow, this lady is really special. I need to get to know her. So what you're going to do is you're not going to go straight to the heart of like what makes her tick. You're not going to ask her super personal questions, right? We're not going to get into those questions. What you're going to do first is get a lay of the land. You're going to try and get a big picture sense of who she is and what makes her tick. So you might ask questions like, "Hey, what do you do for fun? Does your family live around here? What are your hobbies? Those kinds of things. Yeah. I haven't dated. Again, I've been married for my whole life and I'm so happy about it. But I would assume that's what you would want to ask somebody, those kinds of questions. It's the same with a book. You're going to open up to the table of contents, that bit in the very beginning that lays out the structure of this book. And what I want you to do is read that table of contents. Don't glance at it, read it word for word and think about how the author has laid this book out. Because a book is an argument. The author is making an argument to you. You're the interlocutor, you're the person having the discussion with the author. So he or she has laid out the whole argument for you and said, hey, reader, here's where I'm going to take you. It's going to be fascinating. We're going to love it. And you really kind of need to know what's happening. Can you guys imagine sort of getting in your car and driving? Let's say I live in Utah. Let's say I wanted to drive to Maine, which I've been to Maine, wonderful place, but I have no idea how to get there from here. Let's say I know it's east from where I'm at. So let's see, east is that way. So let's say I got in my car and just started driving east. I mean, I could get there eventually, but I probably wouldn't, right? I'm going to want a map. And that's all the table of contents is it's your map. It's your best friend. What it's going to show you is where the mountains are, where the valleys are, where the points of interest are. And you can start to make a mental note of the spots, the landmarks that you want to sort of stop and take out your camera and get a few pictures in. Perhaps camp for the evening, light a campfire, have a remote, a romantic moment with whatever. Getting sidetracked, but you understand, right? Like in the table of contents, you're thinking, that looks really good. That section 3 there, really fascinated by that. Now, how do you know what landmarks are going to be good for you? Well, you don't, but you have a couple clues. One, you've got this thing in your gut called curiosity. Maybe it's in your head, your gut, I don't know, whatever. It's in there somewhere, and you need to listen to it as a reader. You need to just pay attention to that voice that's speaking to you that says, "Hey, this is great right here." Second, though, is to know what your calling is in life. What is it that you want to do with your life? What are you passionate about? And anything related to that passion is going to be more of a landmark than other topics or concepts. So, I'm going back to school to study philosophy, pointing over here at my bookshelf because this is my philosophy bookshelf. I love these books so much, so much. But I know that when I get into a book that is going to have a concept around philosophy, that I'm going to slow down in my car and I'm going to look deeper at the mountains and I'm going to get out and smell the air and so on. All right, you get the analogy, that whatever. But that's what I want you to do is as you're reading through the table of contents, let's be aware of where you're headed. Okay, the second, well, number 2, I don't know. I should keep track of this stuff. I just get excited and I talk to you guys about books because I love books, but I don't have whatever. Here we go. Highlighters. This is my system for highlighting books. Now, I've talked about this before. I'm going to talk about it again because I've been getting a lot of emails and questions. You guys are really fascinated by highlighters. You are just as much a nerd about books as I am, and I love you for it. So I have 5 highlighters. I carry them with me everywhere I go. These are always in my possession. Now there is a blue one, a green one, an orange one, a pink one, and everybody's favorite, the yellow one. I'll tell you why everybody's favorite is the yellow in just a minute. Now, if I have made the decision to get to know this book and fall in love with it, I'm going to get my highlighters out because we're going to be highlighting passages. Now, you might think, wait a minute, Eddie, I don't write in my books. I can't do it. Books are a collector's item, and that's fine. You don't have to do this step. I just want to let you know 2 things. One, the author, again, has made an argument, and he or she is so excited for you to read this argument. They want to have a conversation with you. So if you're not going to highlight in your book, please at least have some sort of note paper or a computer program where you're taking notes. Don't just read it. If all you do is read the book, that's kind of like being that kid in science class in high school who's in the classroom as the teacher's lecturing and you're kind of looking out the window, right? You're not really you're not really paying attention. So if you can get over that sort of hump of worry about writing in a book, I would argue that most authors would be so happy you're writing in their book because it means that you care about all their hard work and their sweat and their tears, their blood, all of that stuff. It's all in these pages. So here's what I do. At the beginning of each book that I love, I write out a little legend, like in the map. If you go to a map, there's a legend, which would say, hey, this is what a road looks like on the map. This is what a river looks like. This is kind of the scale of how far this map is going to take you. Well, in the beginning of all my books, I have 5 items to my legend. And I'm going to go over these quickly because I've got whole videos on this. But what I do in the beginning on the front cover of the book is I put a line for each color of the highlighter. There's a blue, green, orange, yellow, and pink line. Next to those lines, I write what they mean. And here is what they symbolize. My blue highlighter is a primary idea in a book. So there are big concepts, big parts of the argument that the author is making. That's going to get highlighted in blue. Green is connected to blue. Green is a supporting argument. So you'll see a blue highlight, and then below that will be green sort of call outs that support that idea. That's all it is. So by default, I'm going to usually have more green highlights in my book than blue. The next thing I have is orange. And orange is for those just phrases that just make your skin tingle, right? When the author has just somehow gotten magic onto paper and you think, wow, that was a really good passage. You highlight that baby in orange and you share it on social media because it's so good and it's inspiring. So this is my quotes pen. All right. Pink has to do with sources. Now, the more academic you get in your reading and the more sort of rigorous you become in your studies, you're going to begin caring more about the sources that your author used to make their argument. And if you pay attention, you might think, wow, this specific idea is really fascinating. Highlight that in pink, the source, right? You'll highlight the source in pink because that tells you later on to go find that particular book or journal article or whatever. You'll purchase that and you'll read that to expand your knowledge further on this difficult concept, right? So pink is a really great, but sometimes underutilized highlighter. Not gonna lie, I need to get better at it. Now, yellow. Yellow is, it's everybody's favorite highlighter in the Read Well podcast. And I'll tell you why. We get together every Tuesday night online in my book club, and all these people show up, and it's beautiful. I can see all your faces. I love you guys. If you're watching the video, thank you for being in the book club. But we love our yellow highlighters because yellow means that we disagree with something in the book. It means, hey, author, I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense, but I don't agree. I think you're wrong here. And this is really important. This is a way to make your book interactive. You are sending messages back through the ether, through the universe to the author saying, I don't agree with this. And why we do that is because when you come back to this book and you see all of your little tabs on the side that show you how you marked up the book, I can go to a yellow passage in the book. So let's go to a yellow passage here we're winging this, in the intellectual life. Here's a yellow passage. And let's just see what this says. I don't even know what this is. It says, he who reads in view of a piece of work has his mind dominated by what he aims at doing. He does not dive into the water. He draws from it. He stands on the bank, preserves the freedom of his movements. He confirms his own ideas at each borrowing instead of sinking into the ideas of another. And he lays down his book enriched, not dispossessed of what he brought to it. For that would happen if the fascination of the reading interfered with the purpose of utilizing, in which was its justification. So I wrote, I disagree as reading in this way can lead to confirmation bias. Okay, whatever. But the cool thing is I can go back into this book and I can pull out the yellows and I can think, that's interesting. Why did I disagree? The reason why I do this is because I write a lot. My goal in life is to be a writer one day. I want to write essays that matter. I want to one day be the next George Orwell. Wow, that's called Shooting for the Stars. He's my favorite essayist. Christopher Hitchens, fantastic essayist. You get the idea. But when I reference books, I need to be able to go back to those books and find the good and the bad and the ugly because it rounds out my arguments. So the yellow highlighter is a great thing. Now, let's take a quick pause to tell you about the fun little yellow highlighter. Because everybody loves this thing, he, she, it, whatever it is, has become our team mascot at the Readwell podcast, the unofficial mascot. So, as an inside joke, I actually created a T-shirt around the yellow highlighter for those in the community. I just made a shirt on there that has a highlighted mark on the left chest here, and it says "Nope," highlighted in yellow. And then on the back is the Readwell podcast logo. There's a sort of small logo right below the neck. This, of course, is our inside joke because we use the yellow highlighter to disagree with stuff. Nope just means, I disagree. Nope. So if you want to get that shirt, you can get that there. And let's get back to the show. Here we go. Okay, so we're talking about highlighting. Now, I also want to point out that I buy these little Post-it notes. You can get them on Amazon. They're flags, right? They look like this. If I pull one out, it's a little colored flag with an arrow on it. I stick these in my books so that the corners of them just barely stick out of the book. That way I can visually see two things. One, where are the passages that I cared about the most? And in Intellectual Life, I got 1,000 of them. So this is a really good book. But two, I get to see visually how the book was structured. So if you look at this, I can see from the binding, but that's not the binding, the other side of the binding, where the primary ideas are in this book. Isn't that great? And I can see the supporting ideas. I can see the sections of this book I don't agree with. And this is great because I can look at any book and just get a visual sense of, was this a book that I agreed immensely with, or was this a book I just fought with and struggled with? So that's kind of fun. And notice that the flags here, the colors are the exact same colors as my highlighters. So I'll highlight a passage in orange, for example, and then I'll put the orange flag next to it. It's a magical thing, people. Okay, when I talk about books, I get so excited. And it's hilarious, right? Because by day, I am an accountant. I own an accounting firm. Accountants are not known for being passionate, but I am. And so if you find my delivery a little excessive, I'm sorry. I'm talking about things that I love. Let's get into the next tip for reading difficult books, how to get the most out of these things. Well, you have to read a difficult book with a dictionary in hand. And no, your phone does not count. I know you can look up words on your phone, but I want you to stay away from your phone because, well, you know a reason why. I mean, you open up your phone and you're in social media land, you're in notification land. It is really hard to pull you back from the brink of that, and you're going to be lost. I mean, there's a thing called switching cost, right? You've experienced this at work where you'll be in a project and you're just sort of cranking along, and then somebody knocks on your door and says, "Hey, Bob, can I talk for a minute?" So you shut your laptop and you handle Jerry's problem. But then when you come back to your laptop and open it up, you think, okay, wait, where was I at? What's going on? And it takes you 10 or 15 or 20 minutes to get back into the flow of that dang project. Reading a difficult book is exactly the same thing. In fact, we talked last night in book club again. You really should join book club. I think you'll love it. But we were talking about this switching cost in reading books, and everybody agreed that for the first 10 or 15 minutes of reading, it is usually a painful experience because our brains are just so busy, right? I mean, we've been running so hard all day long, taking care of the job and the kids and cleaning the house, that to like get your brain to settle down into a book is challenging, and it's supposed to be challenging. And I want you to give yourself some grace and just be kind to yourself and know that for the first 10 or 15 minutes of your reading session, you're going to be bouncing off the walls, much like Eddie drinking coffee. It's not going to be pretty, but once you get there, you will calm down and it will be better. Uh, so when you open up your phone to look up a word, you're going to pull your brain out of that space that you've worked so hard to earn. I want you to avoid that. So keep your phone away from you. Get a paper dictionary, just a little Webster one. You don't need the big 80-pound situation. Just get a little pocket dictionary. And I want you to look up every word that you don't understand. Now, you're probably thinking, seriously, I don't have time to look up words as I'm reading books. Yes, you do. That is the point of the Read Well podcast, is to tell you that you don't have to read this book in 2 days. There's this big culture out there to read hundreds of books a year, and I don't get it. What if you simply read The Denial of Death, or The Intellectual Life, or Pride and Prejudice, or Crime and Punishment? Let's say you read one of those books this year, but you read it well and it sort of like embedded itself in your soul and you were a better person for it. And you could sit in a book club discussion and not only learn, but share your thoughts and your ideas. And I mean, that's a beautiful thing. That's what we're trying to do. So even if you only get 2 pages of your book read, because you've had to look up words and think, like, what does that mean? That reading session will be so much more valuable to you. So yes, get a paper dictionary, a little pocketbook thing, and keep it with you at all times. Before we get into the last tip I have for you on reading well, and then don't leave because I've got my book recommendation, the weekly book recommendation I always make. I want to thank a few people for helping me to build a better community here at the Readable Podcast. So you are all just so kind in the emails that you're sending, and you're taking time to leave reviews on Apple Podcast. By doing that, you're making the show more accessible and more visible to people. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you found today's video helpful, please take a moment to hit the like button. And if you haven't, subscribe, right? Because we talk about this stuff weekly. We're here to help you read well. But Dido1091 left a wonderful review on the podcast. I just want to thank you, Dido, for doing that. This is a big deal. The title was What a Treasure. And it says, I'm a book nerd like Eddie. Very good. From a very young age. Alas, the past couple years, I went the path of least resistance and read books just for entertainment. I know we know this, but reading for entertainment is a wonderful thing. So we shouldn't get ourselves beat up because we're reading the next beach read or whatever. In fact, last week I posted a video on YouTube about the 6 reasons why I read books. I'll link it up here somewhere. But in that video, one of the reasons is strictly for entertainment. And so that's a great way to read. But Dido goes on to say, following this podcast for a few months, I finally bought a book that makes me read slowly, take notes, and hopefully apply the ideas. Now, where can I buy the RWP coffee mug? Smiley face. 2 things. One, as I mentioned, you can get the mug at thereadablepodcast.com. Just go to shop and it's there. Second, I want to know, Dido, what book you bought to make you read slowly, take notes, and apply the ideas. That's got me curious now. But thank you for your 5-star review and for supporting the work that I'm doing here. Okay, the last tip I have for you when it comes to reading a difficult book is to pay attention to the actual sources that the author is using. I'm going to go through this tip and then I'll give you my book recommendation for the week. But let's say you're digging into The Denial of Death and you've got your pink highlighter out. Pink is for sources that matter to you. And the author makes a point that is just really striking and you think, wow, that is something I want to learn more about. I want to do research on that. I want to whatever. I want you to highlight that in pink. And I'll often highlight the number in the text so that I see it. But then I'll go back and find it in the references page in the back end, and I'll highlight that source. Then what you do, if you really want to read this book deeply and understand the arguments being made, is you need to go find that source. You can find the books on Amazon. You can look up journal articles on Google Scholar. Many, many ways to find these sources. But open them up. And it's great because the best books, which have great sources, link to other books of the same quality and rigorous sort of application. So by digging into the rabbit holes that matter, here's the beautiful thing. You're currently, if you're like me, at times I feel distracted because of all of the reasons we feel distracted. But by doing this, by reading a difficult book well and purposely choosing your rabbit hole to go down, you are defeating that distraction and you are taking control of your brain and what you want to learn versus just simply letting the world give you information. And that's the sad part about the internet, I think. The internet is a beautiful tool and I don't want to rag on it. But yeah, I open up the internet and I've got 10 trillion people telling me what to think and what I should study and believe. And it's obnoxious. By doing this, I am in control for once in my life about what's happening with my brain. Okay. Are you ready for this week's book recommendation? I think you are. Started off this episode, if you're watching the YouTube video, sharing my new espresso machine with you. And here's what I found as I am new to this drink. Coffee is wonderful, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's really bad. I've had bad cups of coffee, and I've had just coffee that makes me like, wow, what is happening in this cup? And I've realized or learned that there is a lot that goes into making a good cup of coffee. So this is why I'm so passionate about it, because it's another one of those things I can geek out about. So my book recommendation this week is James Hoffmann's How to Make the Best Coffee at Home. So if you've been on YouTube at all and you've researched any kind of coffee, you've seen James Hoffmann. This guy is like Mr. Coffee. But here's the thing. This book is just wonderful in so many ways. First of all, it's beautifully written. He's just a fantastic author and has done a great job with it. But the actual layout of the book makes it fun to read. It is photographed so well. So I don't know if you can see these pictures. I know you can't see them on the podcast if you're listening, but there are just great pictures in here that show sort of how he thinks about coffee and what he uses and why he uses it. I mean, it's just a fun book to read and learn from. He starts off by going into sort of the history of coffee, how to buy good coffee, what to look for in roast levels, price, and then he moves all the way through to these gnarly little espresso machines over here that don't always behave the way that they should, to help you sort of wrangle that and have a good cup of coffee in the morning. So that is my book recommendation this week, James Hoffmann's How to Make the Best Coffee at Home. It's beautiful. Go check it out. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Read Well podcast. If you can't tell, I love books and I just love talking about them. So if you found this video helpful, feel free to watch the next one. They'll be showing up here pretty soon. And until next week, as always, remember to read slowly, take notes, and apply the ideas. I'll see you next time.